Hi guys and welcome to TechteamGB. In this video we're going to cover all that you need to know, especially from a beginner's perspective, on monitors. That's panel types, the resolutions, the refresh rates, and a bit about the response times, also the connections they have, and some buying advice. First things first, we've got to talk about the panel types. There's multiple ones and I'm going to omit some of these here. I'm also only going to talk about the main three. That is TN or twisted pneumatic, IPS or in-plane switching, and VA or vertical alignment. TN is by far the most common panel type you will see in computer monitors. This is twisted pneumatic, and I'll leave some links to exactly how all of these panel types work in the description down below for you if you are interested. But the main thing you need to know is that they're cheap to manufacture and therefore the monitors are fairly cheap to buy. They're also the quickest response time, so that's normally grey to grey, or how fast a pixel can change from one grey, cycle through the spectrum, and then back to the same grey. So that's normally measured in milliseconds, so somewhere between 8 if it's a fairly slow monitor to 1 millisecond if it's a nice quick one. They're also normally the faster refresh rate monitors, 144 Hz or more, which is great for gaming, and we'll speak about that a little bit later. And otherwise, the other thing to mention is that they don't have that great color reproduction or that great viewing angles, especially from above and below. So if you're looking at the monitor dead on all the time, if you're sitting at your desk or something, then it's probably fine to have a TN. But if you use it on a laptop, or if you're using it as a TV or something, then you will want to go for an IPS or perhaps even a VA. IPS is the next most common. This is a very interesting one because a few years ago IPS was basically only just for color work and people who cared about great viewing angles. This has changed a lot, and we've seen a lot of development in this area where we're now seeing relatively low response time in the area of 2 milliseconds and even some special 1 millisecond monitors. We're also seeing higher refresh rates up to 140 or even some with 165 Hz. So again, great for gaming there. And the main difference with this is that they're often more expensive to both buy and manufacture, and also the other thing is that they do have better viewing angles and better color reproduction, but generally at the cost of response time and refresh rates. But as I said, that is changing. VA or vertical alignment is something that's kind of always been a niche market, as it is more expensive to manufacture than TN, but it's not quite as good as IPS when it comes to the benefits you get over TN. So while it still does have a little bit better color reproduction and viewing angles over TN, it's still nothing near IPS, and since so much development has gone into IPS technologies, they're coming down in price, so that VA is effectively something that you really don't see that much anymore. On the resolutions front, like the panel types, this is not a full out list. This is the majority list that you'll likely see in shops and that sort of thing. So I'm going to start off with 1080p. This is the most common resolution you will see on display, whether that's TVs or whether that's in monitors. This is the sort of what you might call bare bones these days. This is the sort of lowest end that I would generally look to upgrade to if you're not already on 1080p, and this is the one with the most development and the most options available for it. Stuff like 144, 180 and actually 240 Hz now from ASUS are available for your high-end gaming needs. You also have FreeSync and G-Sync available, which I'll speak more about later. You also, as I said, have both TN and IPS options available with very low to fairly high response times available as well. So this is where I would call the starting point for new monitors these days. Next up from this, you have ultra-wide 1080p. This is 2560 by 1080. This is a very interesting resolution, as monitors are fairly expensive in this price category. Depending on when you watch this, that might be slightly different, as with all of this information, but at this point in time they are relatively expensive. You can get some fairly high refresh rate ones, which is quite nice, especially from the likes of Acer with their Z35. You also have a few different options in terms of what you want to do with it, whether you want to go full content creation mode for stuff like video editing. Having really long timelines is awesome, or if you want to go the full gaming route and just have a more immersive experience, that might be a reason you want to go with that. You can get both TN and IPS versions, and as I said, different refresh rates too. Next up, I would say, is the really sweet spot for monitors at this point in time is 1440p or 2560 by 1440. You can get this in a wide variety of combinations, whether that's TN, IPS, 144, 165 Hz. You can also get G-Sync and FreeSync available for this too, and it's a really great resolution. They're not too expensive depending on which model type you go with, but they're also just giving you that extra screen real estate, whether that's in video games or in content creation. It's a really nice option. Next up is 1600p. This is the 16 by 10 version of 1440p, so this is 2560 by 1600. This is a bit of an oddball resolution for most people, as the world has kind of adopted 16 by 9 for the vast majority of cases. So if you prefer 16 by 10, this is still a very nice resolution to go by. One thing to note though is that because the world has mostly adopted 16 by 9 or 21 by 9 resolutions, you will likely see higher prices for these types of monitors as they're just in lower volumes. You'll also see less development in new features such as higher refresh rates and stuff like G-Sync and FreeSync. Next on this is ultra-wide 1440p or 3440 by 1440. This is a fantastic resolution for gaming and video creation. They're very expensive monitors, at least at this point in time anyway, although they do have G-Sync and FreeSync options available, and some relatively high refresh rate monitors are available as well, which is awesome to see, especially if you are in that sort of latter gaming category of things. And finally, 4K. This has become a very interesting resolution. A couple of years ago, this would have been ridiculously expensive, and it would have been a very much enthusiast grade or content creation, professional business only application. But nowadays, we're seeing actually really great 4K monitors for the likes of £300–400. Stuff like AOC's U2879VF, which I've reviewed in the past, or LG's 27UD68P. Those two monitors are fantastic. The AOC one is a TN monitor. It's 4K, 60Hz, has I believe 1 millisecond response time, which is actually really impressive. Also has FreeSync, as does the LG monitor, although that one is IPS, and that one also has HDCP 2.2 compatibility, so if you want to use that to play your 4K Netflix or whatever, then you can do that as well. So that is quite a nice thing, and as I said, there is a lot of options available for this, whether that's on the gaming side of things with now a 120 or 144Hz monitor from ASUS, or you want G-Sync and FreeSync, or you want content creation and you want 10-bit monitors, color calibrated monitors using IPS and all that sort of stuff. That is all available for not too extortionate of a price. Refresh rates are next on the list to talk about here, and this one is quite important. You have a lot of different refresh rates depending on what type of thing you do. So the main one you'll see is 60Hz. You also have 120 or 144Hz, and you have the category of sort of 144Hz plus is what I'm going to call it. 60Hz is what I would recommend for all non-gaming applications. When I say non-gaming, that also includes console use for games as well, because consoles are not capable of running at 144Hz. They can't change their settings to work with those displays, so a 60Hz monitor is all you will need for any console gaming use or any more general use, whether that's content creation, whether that's content consumption, or really anything in between. That is mostly what I'd recommend. 120 or 144Hz for me is kind of the gold standard of PC gaming. If you have a gaming PC, and especially if your PC can reach above 60 FPS in most games, sort of as an average, then you'll likely see a decent benefit from a 144Hz monitor. This is a fantastic gaming experience. I've personally been gaming on a 144Hz monitor for 3 or 4 years now, and I really do recommend it if you are in the position to pick one of them up. They're a great experience, and there are a lot of options available as well, including using FreeSync and G-Sync too. In the 144Hz plus category, this is really what I recommend for the pro gamers. If you're someone who plays CSGO and can genuinely see a difference between a 5 millisecond and a 1 millisecond response time monitor, then this is the sort of technology I would recommend you go with. Otherwise, this is really kind of resigned to the pro gamers for me. I don't necessarily recommend this for anyone who doesn't have aspirations to be a pro gamer or anything, or someone who genuinely has just that quick reaction times. I just want to take a quick moment to talk about FreeSync and G-Sync. These are AMD and NVIDIA's respectively technologies to handle adaptive refresh rates. This means if you bought a 144Hz monitor, but your graphics card was only capable of outputting, say, 90 FPS, then the graphics card would actually tell the monitor when to refresh, and therefore you'd be refreshing at roughly 90Hz. Obviously that depends on when the graphics card is actually ready to draw a frame. This eliminates tearing, where you have sort of half a frame on the screen and half of the last frame on the screen, which can be a bit of a disjointed gaming experience. So it's something to note if you are looking for a new monitor. If you have an AMD graphics card, I'd personally recommend heading towards the FreeSync monitors, especially because they are normally the same price as just non-FreeSync monitors. whereas because NVIDIA's technology only works on NVIDIA's graphics cards and is a proprietary technology that requires extra hardware inside the monitor, it's often at around about £100 price premium. The next thing I want to talk about are connections here. I'm going to talk about the sort of four main ones you'll see, that is HDMI, DisplayPort, VGA and DVI, and especially DVI because it's quite a complicated beast, that one. The first one I want to talk about is HDMI. This is likely because it's the one you've heard of the most, and this is a very interesting connection. It's kind of a rolling standard where the ports and the cables that you need are technically the same, that it's just the way that the data is transferred over it differs slightly. One thing I would mention is if you're trying to use, especially if you're trying to use an HDMI 2.0 port with 4K 60Hz, then I definitely recommend getting a decent quality HDMI cable here. There are some fairly dodgy ones that you can pick up on the cheap, as they say, but that will have serious signal degradation, very likely. And actually AMD's new graphics driver has a tool that if you're using HDMI, it can basically pull through different frequencies and see if the cable is completely faulty or not, and it'll let you know if it is or not in that kind of case. So that's quite a cool feature, and just something to recommend. If you are using HDMI, then I do recommend getting a decent-ish quality cable. As I said, not the $1,000 ones, but something relatively decent. DisplayPort is the next connection I want to talk about, and for me it's my personal favourite. As a locking connector, which means it won't fall out by accident, which is quite nice, and also it can do, I think, 8K 60Hz now on HDMI 1.4. Also, you can do 4K 60Hz with HDR as well, so a really impressive connection. So as I said, it's my personal favourite, and it's the one that I've just had the least amount of issues with. Generally, all of the DisplayPort cables you can get are fairly high quality, unless they really genuinely feel like they're going to fall apart in your hands. And otherwise, as I said, just a really impressive connection, and the one that I personally recommend. VGA is the next connection here, and this is really a very old connection. It's probably the oldest connection you can currently get on monitors as a sort of standard connector, and I don't really recommend using this unless you desperately have to. It's more of a backwards compatibility thing, as it's an analog connection, so your graphics card does a digital process of the image. It then uses a digital to analog converter to convert those ones and zeros into voltages to send across the wire, and then the monitor has to read those voltages and use an analog to digital converter to then reconvert it to digital signals to then display it on the monitor. It's a bit of a complicated process. Also, the maximum resolution I think is 2048 by 1536, so nothing massively high. You can still run 1080p over it at 60Hz, but again, nothing that fancy. Another thing to mention is that you might also have signal degradation because of the analog to digital conversion that has to go on there, so it's something to be aware of. DVI is the one that I want to talk about last here. It's the most complicated, so I want to kind of run this down for you. First things first is DVI-I has an analog component to it. It has 4 extra pins on the corner next to the sort of big flat piece. That allows you to use one of these sort of simple adapters to convert DVI into VGA. You can also do this via a cable as well if you like, whereas DVI-D, which is the digital version, only sends the digital connection over it, which actually is the same connection and same pin layout as HDMI, so you can very easily convert DVI to HDMI, and if you have a DVI-I port, then you can very easily convert that to VGA as well for backwards compatibility. The other thing to note with DVI is that there's both single and dual link cables available. Dual link is required for 144Hz or 1440p operation, whereas single link will do you fine if you're just running at 1080p. Now the last thing I want to cover here is kind of buying advice. Now if you're a gamer on a low budget, then 1080p 60Hz or 1080p 144Hz, if you can stretch to that, is really what I recommend here. If you're on a more medium budget, then 1080p 144Hz with G-Sync, or 1440p 60Hz, or even 1440p 144Hz if you can reach that, is a really great option. Of course, if you're on a high budget, then you can kind of have anything you like, 4K 60Hz, or even if you're really high budget, then 4K 120Hz, or one of the ultra wide monitors. They're also really a fantastic gaming experience. If you're on the more arty or creative side of things, then a color calibrated 1080p or a color calibrated 1440p or color calibrated 4K monitor are the things that I definitely recommend you go for here. If you're not too worried about color sensitive work, then something that's 60Hz and the best resolution for your money is probably where I'd recommend there, although I would recommend recommend definitely going on the IPS route of things rather than going on TN. Finally, for general use or office use, or if you just need a new monitor for your home PC, then 1080p 60Hz TN, or even if you really want to stretch for, you know, just nicer viewing angles, IPS, that's all I really recommend for that. I don't recommend going much higher if it's just standard use. So I think that pretty much wraps up all the points I have for this video. If you've got any other thoughts, feel free to leave them in the comments down below. Of course, if you've got any questions or you just want some advice on buying a monitor, feel free to let me know in the comments down below and I'll try and get back to you as soon as I can. If you want to support me, the best thing you can do is click subscribe, hit a like button, let me know in the comments down below that you enjoyed it, and share the video. Share it with anyone who's looking to buy a new monitor, or if you just think someone could do with knowing this sort of information, let them know by sharing the video with them. And otherwise, if you want to help me out even more, you could use the Amazon or Overclockers UK affiliate links when you're buying anything on either of those sites respectively. There's links in the description down below for you, so if you could just click on them before you buy stuff, that'd be awesome and supports me massively. Otherwise, yeah, I guess that's kind of that really. I'm going to leave some videos over here for you to check out. Feel free to check out the Explain series where I go into depth on also stuff like GPUs or how they work, or CPUs and the sort of competitiveness in the market and all that sort of stuff. I'll leave those videos over here for you as well, and of course the subscribe button over here too. And otherwise, yeah, thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed it, found it useful and informative, and we'll see you all in the next video.